I recently watched a presentation in which a Navajo Ranger discussed some of the strangeness that seems to be part and parcel of working on an Indian reservation. Specifically, he briefly outlined two stories which stuck out to me and which I wanted to delve into just a bit. The first case involves an old man living alone on the reservation. Keep in mind, there's no plumbing and no running water where he lives. This man is really out there all by himself. There's also no electricity in the area. However, the old man set up a few solar lights around the house in order to offer some light during the night. These will become important later. So let's set the scene. It's late at night. It's fairly dark, except for a couple of solar lights. The old man is home, alone, when suddenly a bright light seems to be coming in through his window. At first he thinks it must be someone coming up to the house, maybe with a large flashlight. What else could it be? He walks up to the window to investigate, and when he looks outside, to his surprise, he sees a round, disc-shaped object floating in the air, and it's glowing brightly. Now, some distance from the house, there's a ridgeline. The disc-shaped object, apparently a craft of some sort, descends and lands on the ridgeline. After a moment, something seems to be moving away from the craft, down the ridgeline, and towards the house.
As he's standing there, his dog, it's kind of a blue heeler mix, a little spotted, and it runs out, barking, gets up there, and in the dark he hears yipe, and this dog comes running back, curls up by the house, and never moves from there. So he starts thinking, hey, something's not right.
Eventually, the figure moving down the ridgeline approached the house, and the old man could see it clearly. What he saw is pretty much what you'd expect.
This is pretty much what he describes, is something about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. He says it's either wearing white or a light gray skin-tight outfit on it. It's got a big head, black eyes, says that they didn't blink. So these things, he said that they had almost like a flashlight looking object, but he said the beam that came out was about 1 inch in diameter, and it was collimated like a laser, and they were shining around. One had a blue one green, one yellow, one red, and they were shining it around. There were 4 of them looking around like they lost something on the ground. And as they would come up to these solar lights, they would gather around it. They were just fascinated by these solar lights.
So essentially the picture we have is this. These creatures that look like alien greys are all carrying different colored flashlights and walking around the perimeter of the house as the old man is watching them from his window. The aliens seem to be gathering near one of the solar lights as though they're investigating them. But as the greys approach the solar-powered light, something very odd happens.
And as they gathered around it, this light has its own battery source, and the light would start getting dim and get dim and get dim and go out. And then they'd all get back and step back from it, and the light would come back on. And he says then they'd get close to it again, and it just kept going out like that.
These greys went on to investigate each of the solar-powered lights that the old man had set up around the house, and then they retreated back to the ridgeline. By this point, the old man had stepped outside, and he had been quietly observing the aliens. He said that they moved without making any sound whatsoever.
Here, this old man, he told us what had happened, and we taped him. After we were done, several months later, we re-interviewed him with a different group. And he told the exact same story, almost word for word. Never added, never embellished, never took anything away. 2 years later, we interviewed him a third time. And the story, again, was exactly the same. Talk about a great witness, huh?
After concluding this portion of his presentation, the Navajo Ranger moved on to a different sort of encounter that people sometimes have on the reservation, the encounter with the much-feared Skinwalker. In popular culture, the term Skinwalker has almost come to refer to any evil entity which escapes immediate categorization. There's plenty I could mention about Skinwalkers, but suffice it to say, they are Native American witches who engage in black magic and are said to be able to change their shape. The Skinwalker is considered such a real threat for the Navajo that before he even began discussing it, the ranger addressed any Navajos in the crowd. He told them that if they would like to leave for the following portion of the talk, they were free to do so. He then went on to say that Skinwalkers are very dangerous and that they go out of their way to harm those who even mention them.
And just to give you an idea, both me and Stan have been attacked just for speaking about this subject. These things can kill very easily. They can poison, they can curse you. The first time we spoke about it was in Oregon. And after we got done, Stan and my families had 9 near head-on collision or intersection accidents in our families in the next weekend. Stan, we got done talking about this one day, and he felt like somebody stuck a knife in his back and just twisted it back and forth. And he had a remote healer that lives in Tucson work on him. And that remote healer was able to alleviate that pain. And he says they're watching you every time you talk.
With these potential dangers addressed, the ranger began to talk about the Skinwalker. First, he spoke about the importance of the animal skin for the Skinwalker's powers of transformation.
The Skinwalker will dress, if you can imagine a man or a woman has a skin of an animal that they want to change into. So that skin is wrapped around them somewhere. They can take the form of a coyote, or a wolf, which is mostly what's seen. They paint themselves. If you took a sponge and put white paint on it, like latex, like you'd use in your house, and you just blotched it all over your body, even your face, your hair, everything. And after a while it dries and it cracks. That's what they look like. We've had reports of people just driving down the highway, and these are not Navajos. Somebody's driving down the highway outside of Winslow. They see somebody painted white standing on the side of the road, and they said as they watched, this thing dropped down on its hands in front and ran on its hands and its feet across the road faster than an animal would run. So they are said to travel incredible distances overnight.
Notice how he makes sure to mention that Skinwalkers paint themselves. This is a detail I almost never hear mentioned. I uploaded a story a while back in which painting oneself was specifically connected with Skinwalker rituals. This story was shared by an anonymous individual online. If you want to hear that story, I've linked it below under the title, The Indian Store. The Navajo Ranger then continued.
They can run. We have had reports of them running alongside vehicles. Stan had one running alongside his vehicle, and he's doing 65 miles an hour. I had a kid and him and his sister were on the road, and one of them was following their car. And they kept speeding up and speeding up. Pretty soon they were doing 75, and this thing was keeping up with them on 2 legs. They carry either a piece of reed or a bone. The bone is traditionally made out of a human bone that's hollowed out. And they put what they call corpse powder in it that's ground up from the corpses of people and the bones of people and other poisons that are included in it. If you get too close to it, it'll take this stuff and spray it right in your face. And that thing will kill you either overnight or very slowly over a couple of days.
This last detail is very interesting. There was a video that J.C. Johnson uploaded many years ago in which a young man shared his story and mentioned this same sort of weapon made out of bone.
It was crazy because he asked me that, and so I had turned and was looking at him, and I turned back as soon as I was done talking to him, and as soon as I turned, I felt like I got a bug bite back here. And a little while later, it just started aching and kind of throbbing, and so I asked him to see if there's a stinger in my neck. I thought maybe it was a hornet or a wasp or something left a stinger in there. And he pulled out this little sliver of bone about 3/4 of an inch long. They were watching me the whole time. Something was up there watching me. And they make weapons out of bones, and he thinks they threw it at me, like a dart or something, or shot it, I don't know. But
like through a blowgun. That's
yeah,
like a blowgun dart.
And I told him what happened, and he said, if you hadn't have turned, you might be dead. And so I got really freaked out, you know. And he told me that I was cursed by skinwalkers.
This young man believed his friend when he told him that he had been cursed. But how does one lift a curse sent by a skinwalker anyway? Luckily, this young man's friend, a Native American individual, had an answer for him.
We went out there, and I've grown up here all my life, but he told me we needed a plant to do this with, and I had never heard of it. But we eventually found it. It was like a bluish-green plant, kind of like sagebrush, but leafier. And we had strong winds, but he put it on top of the skull, and he's trying to light it on fire with a lighter. And I was thinking, you know, this ain't gonna work. But after a little while of trying, it amazed me because it goes up in this green flame. And
all at once, like
all
poof.
at once, just whoosh, like he had dumped gasoline over it.
Wow.
He stood up and he starts shouting Navajo out in different directions and stuff. And I was, you know, going white by this time, going, this is crazy, because the winds were really going, but it was like it didn't affect the fire at all. And he's speaking in Navajo and stuff, and then the fire dies down, and then it went out. And he told me, okay, now we're going to go camp, and in the morning we're going to come back and look, and if it's still here, you're okay. If it's not still here, you're pretty much screwed. And so...
For those of you interested in watching this video in its entirety, I've linked it in the description below. Just for a moment, I want to revisit something that the Navajo Ranger stated earlier. He said that often people report being chased by these skinwalkers, who usually appear as wolves or coyotes. This, of course, is reminiscent of a recurring motif in so-called Dogman encounters. These dogmen resemble, for all intents and purposes, werewolves. They have large canine heads, are covered in fur, and walk upright. Many people have come forward, sharing terrifying stories of being pursued by these creatures while driving. These individuals often state that dogmen never seem to have any trouble keeping up with moving vehicles. The following is an account from the very popular Dogmen Encounters program.
And I'm doing about 50 at this point, Vic. I look out the left-hand side next to us, about 2 foot next to me. I see this creature. It's running right next to us. This thing is on 2 legs, but it's got its arms in front of us hanging down, and it's running next to me. I can hear its feet hitting the ground, even with this vehicle that we're in, to the floor. I can hear it boom, 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 just taking big strides right next to us. I mean, I don't personally know if it was at a full sprint, but I had this thing to the floor, and it was staying right next to us. Leaning down, looking into the window, I see its eyes. And again, they're these amber-colored looking eyes. This thing was beyond evil.
Interestingly, one can tie Skinwalker and Dogmen stories to a creature from folklore, the Black Dog. Black Dog sightings are very old. In many of the stories, they are often described as huge, with glowing eyes. They often chase people as well, terrifying but not usually injuring those that come across them. This immediately draws a parallel between these Black Dog sightings and the Dogmen encounters in which individuals describe being pursued by large canids whose eyes seem to glow a strange amber color. The encounters are often described as psychologically traumatizing although the individuals are not often harmed. Furthermore, the black dog is often thought of as an omen of doom. To see one usually means that you or someone you know will soon die. Consider that when you hear this next story, in which Haas Lors encounters what he thinks at first is just a strange-looking dog.
I was in Dilcon, and this dog came up the road and into our driveway and into the garage, and just foaming at the mouth and looked, pretty bad. This dog just kept coming up, into the garage and, at me. And so I grabbed a 2x4 and I thought, oh, this dog has rabies. So I hit the dog over the head with a 2x4. I hit it 2 or 3 times and killed it because, we had children there and everything. So put the dog out of its misery and kind of drug it out, threw it out in the snow. Told my wife, hey, take this dog, take it out to the dump, and dump it. Put my boots on, walk back out. I look outside the door, there's no dog. Fast forward a day, I'm deathly ill. All I wanted to do was die. I mean, I was just that ill. My neighbor came over and he says, hey, you got to go see a medicine man. And I was like, your wife and I are going to drive out and see this medicine man. So they drove about 45 minutes out to the medicine man, and medicine man just looked at them and said, where's Haas? How come he's not here? If you don't bring him, he'll be dead by morning. And what the medicine man said to me was, the dog that came into the garage was a skinwalker. And by beating it over the head, it released a powder, what they call a corpse powder, which is ground up human bones mixed with hallucinogenics and different things. That it released that, and I breathed it in. And that's what was going to kill me.
Imagine how this scenario would have played itself out without the intervention of a medicine man. Haas would have encountered a strange dog and attacked it. The dog's body would have then mysteriously disappeared, as though it were never there. Haas would have fallen ill the next day, and perhaps died. This is the same sort of story you hear regarding encounters with the black dog, who at times is said to be a ghost, and at other times, a monster. I also mentioned that these black dogs from folklore are said to have glowing eyes, but specifically, they are said to have glowing red eyes that look like, quote, saucers. Again, I'll ask you to keep that in mind as you listen to Haas describe another quick sighting.
Up maybe 10 feet away up out of the ground, just like coming out of a hole in the ground, just these 2 half human, half wolves with glowing red orb eyes they just come right up out at me.
One last connection. I'll only touch on this briefly, just as a way to bring this all around to the first story, involving the alien greys. The black dog holds a special place in the so-called fairy faith, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with to some degree, but fairy stories have been connected by some researchers to modern-day alien encounters. Both of them often involve unwanted abductions, which are usually accompanied by missing time. An abductee may believe that only a few moments have passed, or that no time has passed at all. But in reality, hours and sometimes days or years have gone by. There are other connections, but this will suffice for now, I think. It seems interesting enough that there is a preponderance of bizarre cases located in and around the Navajo Nation, and it's worth considering the connection that these phenomena might have with the folklore of other cultures. The same sorts of stories keep popping up again and again. Is this evidence of a unique aspect of human psychology at work? Does a domain of physical reality that normally remains hidden occasionally allow itself to be apprehended by our limited brains? Could all of these encounters be, in some sense, the same thing?